Welcome to Woman Things, the podcast, a show dedicated to women who want to connect with their bodies and optimize their health for a more holistic and balanced life. We are your hosts and women's health experts, Cara Moore and Kirsten Humphreys, and we will be taking you on a journey of education and empowerment.
Stay tuned each week while we break down all the hottest topics in women's health today, including food and nutrition, periods, gut and skin health, fertility, and everything in between. You can find us on Instagram at Woman Things, that's woman, WOMXN, and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform to keep up to date with all the latest episode releases. We hope you enjoy the episode today, and thanks so much for tuning in.
This podcast is sponsored by London Nootropics and A Little Find. London Nootropics are a London-based company that makes a blend of high-quality coffee with nootropic and adaptogenic tonics that help to balance the body and boost brain function. We love these coffee blends. Our personal favorite is the Grind Blend, which has a mixture of lion's mane mushroom and rhodiola that helps boost mental clarity and focus and improves overall motivation. If you love a morning cup of coffee, why not try some of these amazing blends for yourself? You can find them at londonnootropics.com or on Instagram at london.nootropics. And A Little Find are an online department store where you can discover innovative, aesthetic, and conscious brands on one single platform for all ages across all categories. We love A Little Find as it shines a spotlight on brands who have a particular focus on being eco-friendly, low-waste, and sustainable. It was from being asked, just where did you find that, many times that the idea for A Little Find was born. You can find them at alittle.find.com or on Instagram at A Little Find. Hello and welcome to this wonderful episode of Woman Things, the podcast. Today's episode is all about the vagina and vaginal health, and this includes how it's structured, how it functions, and also some of the more taboo topics around the vagina and female sexuality. This is a near and dear topic to me as through a lot of my younger years, I really struggled to feel comfortable with the look of my vagina, and it's only been in the recent few years where I've actually started to embrace and love my vagina for what it is. The vagina is an amazing part of the body, and it's incredibly strong, and we don't give it enough credit. To start things off, we're going to introduce ourselves. My name's Kirsten. I'm a registered nutritional therapist, certified health and wellness coach, as well as an NLP practitioner. I specialize in women's health, and in particular, I work with women one-on-one online with any issues revolving around their skin, gut, and hormones, and also their mental well-being. I am passionate about educating women on how to live healthier and happier lives and helping people to develop the tools to gain control over their own health. And of course, today I'm joined by Cara.
Hi, thanks, Kirsten. So my name is Cara. I'm a clinical nutritionist and fertility awareness educator. In my online clinic, I work with people that are struggling with problematic periods and hormonal concerns. I help women who are struggling with their fertility conceive naturally and provide nutritional support throughout the journey of pregnancy and into early motherhood. I also coach the fertility awareness method, so I teach natural contraception to women and those who want to get more in tune with their fertility and menstrual cycle. You can find me on Instagram at fempowered_health or on my website www.fempoweredhealth.com. And you can find Kirsten on Instagram at kickstart_with_Kirsten and on her website www.knhwellness.co.uk.
So we're going to start things off today with a brief anatomy lesson on the vagina and what it is. When I was looking up some things to write some notes on this episode, I actually found a survey that said in this survey in particular, 45% of women could not label the vagina on a diagram, and more than half of them, which was about 52%, couldn't describe its function, which is actually pretty shocking.
Yeah, it's crazy, but I think I would have included myself in that statistic a few years ago as well.
Definitely me as well.
Yeah, again, it's just something that we don't get that education on, and it's really important as women to be educated on our reproductive organs and genitals.
Yeah, from what we actually learn about growing up and throughout my early adulthood is mostly just about the function of our sexual organs as reproductive organs, but there's so much more to them than that, isn't there?
So much more, and I guess the biggest one that's missed is, when it comes to women, is sexual pleasure with the reproductive organs or genitals. So let's stop beating around the bush and get started with it. Kirsten, do you want to explain the anatomy of the vagina?
I love that pun in there. So the vulva and the vagina are the external parts of the female genital system. The cervix, which is inside the vaginal canal, connects the vagina and the uterus and the other inner pelvic organs, including the fallopian tubes and the ovaries. On the outside of the vagina, there's the labia minora, which is the inner lips, and the labia majora, which is the outer lips, and these can vary in shape, sizes, and colors, and no one vagina looks the same. We, of course, have pubic hair on our vagina, and this helps to protect the delicate tissues of the vagina and the cervix. And we also have quite a lot of sweat glands, similar to that what's in the armpits. So we do actually sweat a lot from this area as well. So we also have the clitoris, which is located outside of the vagina. It has no real purpose for reproduction. It's simply there for our pleasure and to make us feel good. It has more than 8,000 nerve endings in the tip alone, and it's actually much larger than what meets the eye. And it's a mixture of erectile tissue, muscles, and nerves. We also have the oh-so-famous G-spot, which got its name in the 1980s through a doctor called Ernst Grafenberg. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but he's a German physician, and he wrote about its existence in the 1950s. And most women, though, in fact, cannot actually orgasm through the G-spot stimulation alone, and they need stimulation through the clitoris and other parts of the bodies to actually help with an orgasm. So I just wanted to note as well, there's actually no real evidence that says that the more sex you have, the wider your vagina becomes, and the more you abstain from sex, the tighter it becomes. So that's a myth. So have lots of great sex because it's really good for your health.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's true. It's so true. And I think it's just something that was created to suppress female sexuality in a way. But that's almost like another topic entirely. So for me, I always thought that the vagina was like the whole, I don't know how to describe it, vagina, but it's actually only the canal that's from the external into the internal. And there's not really a word that we use, an anatomical word that's correct for like our whole female genital area. So that was mind blowing for me when I learned that.
Yeah. So, and just to note that typically because I had mentioned it before, when you hear the word vagina, as Cara said, is the canal, but then when you hear the word vulva, it's typically referring to the actual outside of the vagina.
Yeah, the lip.
And I actually really like it.
You like the word vulva?
Yeah, it's a nice word.
Kind of rolls off the tongue like vulva.
Yeah.
So
I got my vulva.
I've never asked you this before, but it's interesting because I think a lot of people call it something different. But what do you call your vaginal area?
No, sometimes I say vagine just for fun, but
I normally use, I will use vagina, but I'll make some type of abbreviation of it as well, like vagina.
Yeah. I might just start saying vulva all the time.
Yeah, sometimes I use pussy, but not too much. I do really like the Sanskrit term yoni, if you've heard of that
Yeah,
before.
yoni's nice.
That kind of encompasses the whole female reproductive tract, and yoni actually means the gateway to life, which is really beautiful, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's really nice. Also, too, with the new popular song WAP, maybe more people are going to start using the word pussy.
Yeah, I love it. I love to get down to that song.
Okay, so let's go into a little bit more about the vagina, and Cara is going to explain a little bit about how it functions and some of the things that you may not know.
Yeah, so I thought we'd start with the vaginal microbiome and the vaginal pH, which is quite scientific to jump straight into from that, but it's really important because it helps to maintain the health of the vagina. And when the microbiome or the pH of the vagina is disrupted, that's when we see infections such as thrush or candida and your bacterial vaginosis, for example. So just like our guts, our vagina has its very own microbiome, which is an ecosystem made up of different bacteria that contribute to our health. The difference between the gut and the vaginal microbiome is that the vaginal microbiome is quite sensitive to the introduction of different bacteria strains. Well, I guess the gut is as well, but there is a difference here. So whilst the gut predominantly thrives on diversity, less diversity in the vagina is what is preferred. So the genre that is predominant in a healthy vaginal microbiome is the Lactobacilli strain. So the Lactobacilli maintain the acidic environment of the vagina. So the vagina has a pH of around 3.6 to 4.5. For those of you who aren't familiar with the pH scale, it's a scale which measures the acidity or the alkalinity of an item. So a pH of 7 is considered neutral, and anything lower than 7 is considered acidic, with numbers higher than 7 being more alkaline. The vagina needs to be acidic as it is a gateway into our internal organs, so into our womb and our fallopian tube, so inside the body. The acidity protects from potential pathogens pathogens or viruses, or from other bacteria or yeasts making themselves really comfortable down there and thriving in our vaginal microbiome and becoming problematic and potentially causing infections. There are also tons of immune cells present in our discharge and in the mucosa of the vulva, vagina, and cervix to help protect and fight from potential infection. So it's really important to know about the vaginal microbiome and pH, because when things change in that area, that is when we come across things like infections. So the next thing I wanted to touch on briefly is the pattern of the discharge in the vagina. So the pattern of our discharge does naturally change throughout the month according to our levels of hormones present and where you are in your menstrual cycle. Typically at the beginning of the cycle, so after your period, you will have a sensation of either dryness at the vulva, which will change as your hormone levels rise. So as estrogen increases, you will produce something called fertile mucus. So you might notice at this time an increase in the quantity of the discharge that's produced and also its quality. So it becomes more slippery and stringy, similar to the consistency of egg white. So this is really normal, and this is known as fertile mucus. So this type of mucus helps to transport sperm up into the vaginal canal, past the cervix, up through the uterus and the fallopian tubes. So there can be a potential implantation if that's what is desired.
I'm just going to add on as well that a lot of people think that the discharge in their underwear is abnormal and that the changes in the color of their underwear is abnormal, but actually because of the acidity of the discharge, it can change the color of your underwear, and this is normal and nothing to be worried about.
Yeah, exactly. I think there was something went a little bit viral a couple of weeks ago on TikTok, but about underwear bleaching and kind of shaming women who have that. And it's natural. Like, our vagina is meant to be acidic. It's healthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So after we have our fertile mucus, our discharge changes again. And typically it becomes more thicker and drier and white. And this is there to form a mucus plug in our cervix to protect us from the outside world, from our inside world, and protect from possible infections. So this normal change in the vaginal environment can be predicted if you track it, and it should remain quite consistent. So you should only really be concerned if all of a sudden your regular discharge pattern changes, and it might be associated with some other symptoms as well. So Kirsten, do you want to talk us through what might happen if things are not quite right?
Yeah, so there's a few things that can go on. A few of them just quickly naming, which is thrush or yeast infections. You can get bacterial vaginosis or UTIs or recurrent UTIs, which are urinary tract infections. But how to know is some of the symptoms that you get with these things, in starting with thrush or yeast infection, which can be in the vagina or also in the penis of a man. And the symptoms include itchiness, irritation, a white discharge that sort of looks like cottage cheese. And it may be passed through sexual intercourse, although this is uncommon. But oftentimes these are the major symptoms, and you'll know if something's not right. And it's at that point, it's best to go into a chemist, speak to your doctor, see if there's any kind of treatment plan that can get rid of this acute infection. There's also bacterial vaginosis. And symptoms of this include a white and watery vaginal discharge that often has a strong fishy smell, and this particularly comes after sex. But 50% of women with bacterial vaginosis don't actually have any symptoms. Bacterial vaginosis doesn't cause any soreness or itching usually, and it's often treated with antibiotics. So most women will also experience a urinary tract infection at some point in their life, and the symptoms include burning while urinating, possibly blood in the urine, and usually a fever. And many women who have recurring urinary tract infections will need antibiotics, but there's also some natural preventative measures, which Cara will explain to you in a little bit. But before we go into that, I just want to touch on a topic that's quite important. Women historically have been shamed for their sexual health and their sexual desires. And in fact, the word slut used to refer to a woman who was dirty or untidy in their habits or their appearance, and they didn't conform to the male-dominated society and how men wanted women to look and behave. So the word slut is now regularly used to shame and oppress women who like to explore their sexuality a little more, which is really quite sad. So I think that we should stop using the word slut because it's harmful and unnecessary.
Yep, agree. Definitely agree.
On the flip side, though, if you are exploring your sexuality more for acceptance and for grabbing attention from others rather than your own magical and amazing experiences, this may have a negative psychological effect and can negatively impact your overall well-being.
Yeah. It's also said that when we do partake in activities that we're not doing for our true self, or it's something that we're doing for somebody else and not for ourselves, that we store that negative trauma like in our reproductive area and in our vagina as well, which can lead to pain and tenderness of the area, and even, if you will, like potentially infections and things like that from unprocessed emotions, which I know it sounds a little bit woo, but I really believe that in that really strong like emotional vaginal connection.
Yeah, most definitely. So if you are going to have sex, do it for your own pleasure. And we have an expert guest coming later in this season who's going to discuss a lot more of this into detail and explore female sexuality a little bit better than we can probably explain.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to that. As well, with the vaginal emotion connection, it's like not a topic that is commonly discussed. And in particular, I think that it's really important to pay attention to what's going on with your emotions if you are experiencing recurrent vaginal infections or UTIs and things like that. So your emotions, in particular, emotions like stress and anxiety, they can cause changes in your vaginal discharge, which slightly disrupt the pH. So norepinephrine or noradrenaline, our stress hormone, stimulates cells in our upper cervix to produce our fertile mucus when we're not actually in the fertile stage of our cycle. And what happens there is that type of mucus has a different pH and components to it. So it's lower in immune cells. And the reason being is that it helps to transport the sperm safely into the uterus for potential pregnancy. But if we're having that during long periods through the month, that means that the pH of our vagina is being changed quite slightly. And so is the immune response that we have there.
That's some really interesting stuff.
Yeah. And the constant stress response as well, it affects our hormonal balance. It causes issues between our communication between our brain and our ovaries, which is known to disrupt our vaginal microbiome and pH, but also it causes effects on our immune system as well. So it can suppress our immune system there when it's chronic, and that as well can lead us open to infections.
So that kind of opens us up nicely. Should we discuss some of the natural treatments and how to avoid some of these infections?
Yeah, for sure. So coming right off what I've just said, supporting your immune system and microbiome, looking at your fiber and prebiotic content in the diet to support the microbiome. So consider consuming some fermented foods, so your sauerkraut, your kimchi, your yogurts, your kefirs. And if recurrent infections are an issue for you, perhaps looking at supplementing with a probiotic strain such as Saccharomyces boulardii, which is particularly good at suppressing yeast such as Candida, and two strains in particular which have been shown to help recolonize lactobacilli populations in the vagina. So that's your Lactobacilli rhamnosus GR1 or your Lactobacillus reuteri B54 strains. So other nutrients to help support your immune system can be your zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D, selenium, vitamin A, iron, and of course making sure you're getting enough protein in your diet and not eating too many sugars. So that's really another really important one, especially for bacterial overgrowth and UTIs, as refined sugars can essentially feed the bacteria that predominate in these type of infections. So avoiding processed food, refined flours such as your white breads, pasta, cakes, pastries, soft drinks, confectionery items and things like that, because that can potentially be exacerbating your symptoms. Also alcohol and caffeine can be triggers too.
Yeah, and then opting for more whole grain versions of those foods as well will also be beneficial. So your whole grain pastas, whatever you want to do, but the whole grain component of it will help prevent that happening.
Yeah, definitely. So it's more your refined sugars that we're looking at overall. It's making, again, the right choices about your carbohydrates there. The next thing is, again, with the vaginal emotion connection, getting some support mentally if you need it, and looking ways at releasing past traumas or emotions, but also if you're particularly stressed or suffer from anxiety, because it can affect the pH like we've discussed. So the next thing is making sure you support your hormones if there is an imbalance there. So estrogen fluctuations can interfere with your vaginal pH and microbiome. So this is particularly important if you're experiencing cyclic infections there. Tracking your cycle and your symptoms and making a note of when you're experiencing these flare-ups can be good if you think that there is a recurrent pattern with your infections, and it will potentially be able to help you pinpoint what might be triggering it. And lastly, there's two supplements that are particularly indicated if you suffer from recurrent urinary tract infections, and those is considering supplementing with a supplement called D-mannose or a high-strength cranberry supplement to help prevent future infections.
So we're going to take a quick break to do a little bit of myth busting about the vagina.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the biggest one that I thought is worth mentioning is the fact that the vagina is not meant to smell floral. Every vagina has its own individual smell, And it's not meant to smell like strawberries. It's not meant to smell like roses. It has a smell and it's a vagina smell, and that's just the way it is. And everyone has its own unique, beautiful smell, and there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yep, so there's no need for any intimate sprays or douches to try and change the smell. Your vagina just should smell like a vagina. It should be quite neutral. And of course, if there's any changes in scent or there's something that's a little bit more, I guess, an offensive odor like Kirsten spoke about, then maybe you might want to think about having a check with your GP just to make sure that everything's okay down there. So to kind of wrap things up, we have compiled a list of do's and don'ts, kind of like the vagina care manual. So things that you can do to make sure you're looking after the health of your vagina and reproductive tract, and things to avoid, especially if you do experience any recurrent infections there.
So some things to take note of is to promote vaginal health would be to wear cotton or bamboo underwear to promote breathability. The vagina needs to breathe. It can't be closed in all the time. We need to give it that space and air to stay healthy. When you're washing, wash the vulva, which is the outer area only. Do not douche or wash inside. As Cara said, the vagina actually cleans itself, and use plain unperfumed soaps to wash the area around the vagina gently every day, being careful not to be too harsh. Washing inside the vagina can actually disrupt the natural bacterial balance and increase your chances of infection, as Cara said, but I'm just saying it again, just to make the point clear. Cleaning things like your menstrual cup and your sex toys. If you're using a menstrual cup, remove the cup and empty the blood into the toilet, then rinse it out with clean water and use a mild oil-free, fragrance-free soap to give it a quick clean. Once it's clean, you can then reinsert the cup, and then make sure to fully sanitize it before your next period. So this would be putting it in a pot of boiling water for 1 or 2 minutes just to quickly sanitize it. Also clean your sex toys, if you're using any, with mild soap and warm water or a damp soapy washcloth. Making sure you are peeing after sex to avoid infection. Women have shorter urethras than men, so generally it's easier for bacteria to get up there and cause recurring infections. And if you are using condoms, which are obviously great to help protect against sexually transmitted diseases or infections, but if you're someone who suffers from a latex allergy, symptoms can include rashes and hives, and in severe cases breathing problems, although this isn't common. It's around 1% of people who actually have this allergy. And they can also help to avoid some infections because the sperm ejaculated can actually disturb the pH of the vagina. Condoms, though, themselves may cause UTIs in some women because of the spermicides inside the vaginas, which are semen destroyers. So it's best to use non-flavored, latex-free condoms to avoid any issues. Another thing is to get Pap smears regularly. There's something called HPV, which is a viral infection. It's in about 70 to 80% of people, and it can actually change the cells on your cervix, putting you at increased risk of cervical cancer. So it's best just to get checked as a preventative measure, and this can be done at your GP. STI checks as well if you're having unprotected sex with an unknown partner, and if you start to notice any differences in your discharge and smell, as we said, definitely go to your GP and get them checked out. Just note though that not all STIs show discharge or smell, so getting a checkup here and there is just beneficial for your overall health. If you are a bit worried about getting these types of checkups, just make sure you are clear with your doctor at the time about how you're feeling, and hopefully they can do your best to work with you and show compassion, and just be as open and honest as you can about your fears, beliefs, and any misconceptions, and allow them to understand where you're at so that they know the best possible way to approach the situation for your comfort. And then we have a little list of don'ts, which Cara is going to share with you now.
Yeah, so they're really just reiterating on some of the things that we spoke about, but don't sleep in undies so you can let your vagina breathe, as Kirsten was saying. Avoid douching and intimate personal sprays because they can disrupt the pH and microbiome there, leading to potential infections. Don't leave tampons or menstrual cups in for too long due to increased risk of infection. Like Kirsten said with condoms, make sure that you're avoiding things like flavored lubes or things that might initiate a reaction for you after use. And if you are including anal play in your sexual intercourse activities, just making sure that you don't have risk of contamination. So making sure that if you use a toy or a body part inside the anus, that you're not then inserting it into the vagina, because you can run risk of infections and introducing different bacteria species there.
So avoiding the double dip, as you'd say.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And most importantly, love your vagina. Send it love. You know, your vagina is amazing. It does a lot of things for you. Practice self-love. Tell it you love it every day. These are important.
These are really important. I think really getting to understand what your vagina and what is going on throughout your cycle can be really empowering, can help you overcome any embarrassment or shame around discharge, the way your vagina looks, the way that it smells, these things can really affect a woman's self-esteem and sex life. And just getting more in touch with it can help you communicate more effectively to your partner and live more in tune with your body and have better relationships.
So just to recap before we end here, the vagina is unique. It's beautiful. Everyone's vagina is different. It smells different. It looks different, but that's totally okay. That's how it is, and that's completely normal.
Yeah, and we have natural changes within our discharge patterns throughout the month, which are there to protect us and serve a purpose. So if you do notice a change from your normal fluctuating patterns, and there is symptoms such as like redness, irritation, pain on urination, pain on intercourse, or anything like that, make sure you go and get it checked out with your GP. And if you are having recurrent infections, looking into how you can make some diet and lifestyle choices and potentially with some supplements to help support your body and your vagina.
Great. Thank you. That is all for today. Have a great day. Thanks for listening, everyone. Thank you for listening to our show today. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure that you subscribe, let us know what you thought in the comments, and share it with all the important women in your life. There are plenty more of these episodes to come, so please visit our website to stay in the know. You will find us at womanthings.com. That's WOMXN. Much love, Kirsten and Cara.
The information contained in this podcast is not intended to treat, diagnose, or replace the advice of your healthcare practitioner. Always consult with a qualified health professional if you have a pre-existing health condition or are currently taking any medications before making any changes to your diet or lifestyle.